Hey, it's Tyler Craddock from Norfolk Governmental Affairs. We're back with you. We again are privileged to have Monica Gilroy with the Gilroy Law Firm with us. As you all know, Monica is a member of the NARPM Atlanta chapter and has over 27 years experience in all sorts of issues related to property management. So today what we're talking about, and it's the day that we're recording this, it's April the 6th, it's a Monday. And so you have tenants who've paid, and you have tenants perhaps who've not. And so that's what we're talking about today, are the conversations that you have with those residents. So Monica, it's the 6th. I'm a property manager. I've got folks who've paid and folks who've not. How does that conversation start?
It's a great question. Well, hello, Tyler. Great to be back again. And all my NARPM friends, hope you had a good weekend. But yeah, it is April 6th. And so what we're hearing about from most of our property management clients and friends here, at least in the Southeast, is that we're seeing about 80 to 90% actually getting paid, which is great, which I thought was pretty good. But we definitely are going to be seeing some folks who are having some difficulty, and probably, as you and I were just talking about, Tyler, we'll probably go even further into next month. So it's good to have a conversation right now with all of us to know about how you should be having a conversation with your tenants. So the first thing is, I hope you've done your homework, like we talked about in our first presentation, and you know which of your properties have those federally backed mortgages and which don't. Remember, again, if you have a property with a federally backed mortgage, you're not going to be able to initiate any eviction, but also not collect any late fees or anything of that nature. So always be sure you're being compliant, because you wouldn't want to find yourself in a situation later down the road. Also, be sure you're being compliant with any state or local rules in terms of evictions or late fees or anything of that nature. Now, you're going to need to just do the number one thing that we have to do in our world these days is talk. You're going to have to talk to your tenants. If your tenants are not reaching out to you to say, I'm having trouble making my rent this month, or you haven't gotten anything from them, you must pick up the phone and talk to them. If they're calling you, you also need to engage with them. The real question here is going to be just find out what the situation is. Everyone might be different. Some may be actually unemployed, have lost their jobs. Some may be more concerned of using the money now in the event they don't have some later. So it may be that they could pay the rent, but they're just nervous about expending all of their resources. And some may just, be really unsure what to do. So you've got to take the lead as the property manager, Tyler. You've got to be able to say, okay, what's going on? What's your situation? A couple things I've had some questions about. Can I ask for proof? If someone says they've lost their job, can I ask them to show proof? Sure you can. I mean, just be sure, as always, with anything we do in property management, to avoid any fair housing implication, ask it from everybody. So if everybody asks for a forbearance on their rent, be sure you're asking for proof from everyone, not just from a hand-picked few. You can ask questions, and frankly, you should be engaging them, Tyler, in what's concerning you, what's the issue, what's causing this problem. Now, it is fine to consider on your own as the property manager, obviously with your owner's just, consent, either a forbearance, no rent paid at all, or some sort of partial pay. There's nothing in any of the states in which we're coming to you that would prevent that, with the exception of you've got to be sure, Tyler, you are documenting whatever you're doing. It is absolutely fine to amend a lease or to do an addendum to a lease that talks about the fact that you're going to permit a rent forbearance. I would specifically mention COVID-19. I'd say due to the COVID-19 crisis, and then begin your sentence. Be sure that you make it very clear in whatever you're drafting that it doesn't affect any other portions of the lease. In other words, you want the lease to remain in full force and effect. There's a little bit of legalism for you, Tyler, but it really is important to be sure you're restating that this isn't a cancellation of the lease. It's just either a temporary or perhaps, depending on the circumstances, permanent change to the lease and for those issues. I think it's very important to take it month by month, talking to your tenants about the rent. I don't know that you necessarily want to sign documents that forecast this out months and months and months. We just don't know. So I think it is better to take everything in when you're documenting it on a month by month basis. Remember, in my opinion, it's always best to have the home occupied and rented. I find that more trouble comes to owners and property managers when we're dealing with properties that are empty or vacant. I've been hearing stories around parts of the country where we are having some individuals getting into the empty houses again, trying to have squatters. In our area of the country here in Georgia, we have a lot of what are called sovereign citizens, the individuals who don't believe that the rules of the United States apply to them. So there could be some real challenges to having those houses not be occupied during this time. So it's best to try to keep it occupied, keep your tenants in there and work with them. Also remember too, that until the eviction stay is lifted, you are prohibited from taking any actions. But again, having a rented home is better than an empty one in these time frames. So that's what we're going to talk about in terms of the rent.
Wonderful, wonderful. And I would add this as the NARPM GAD, the same advice that I always give to NARPM members. When you go to writing contract addenda and such, always, whether it's Monica in Georgia or attorneys elsewhere and who practice in the area where your real estate practice is, when you start doing that, consult an attorney, because that's what they get paid to do and do well, are those contracts and those contract addenda, and you avoid those sorts of unintended consequences of affecting other parts of the lease. That the one editorial comment from the Governmental Affairs Department. So we've gotten to the point, we've had the conversation about rent, and let us assume this is a tenant who, for whatever reason, is unable to pay rent, not paying rent, but they're still in the home, and obviously let's assume, even whether it's for federal law, local, state law, whatever, for whatever reason they're in there, they're not paying rent, but they're in there. But then the tenant calls you 2 weeks later and makes repair requests. And of course, I'm sure that probably leads to interesting conversations with owners and with tenants, but how does that scenario then play out?
That's another great topic of what to talk to your tenants about. And you make a really good point. And I think in everything we've been talking about these last few times together, always be sure you're keeping your owners fully up to date. I'm sure everyone who's a NARPM member does do that because they're smart and learned and watch things like this so they know what to do and not do. But it is so important not to fly solo here. You always have to be sure your owners are aware. But yes, talking to tenants about repairs is extremely important during this time, because you still have your duty as the property manager, or if your model is where you're the property management landlord, to keep the house habitable, to keep the property in a habitable condition, not in violation of any state laws. So you must respond to the repair requests as well. But given we're here in these extraordinary times, you want to alert your tenants that some repairs may be delayed due to various shelter-in-place orders or other limitations that may be placed. When you read most of the state's shelter-in-place orders that I've looked at, definitely some of these repair categories fall for essential services, plumbing, electricity, anything that goes directly to habitability, I think without question is going to be an essential service. What about if the disposal breaks or the dishwasher breaks? I think I've seen some companies kind of take that on their own stride, whether they believe they're essential or not. But if in fact you're using a vendor, say, to come in and say, fix the refrigerator or fix the garbage disposal, something like that, have a protocol in place with your tenants, and keep in touch with them so that they know that you've been talking to your vendors, you know what kind of precautions your vendors may be taking. And then on the flip side, let your vendors know that you're talking to your tenants. We'll remind them of the need to conform with social distancing while the repairmen are in the house. I actually had a delivery here earlier today that wasn't Amazon or FedEx, and the individuals who came to my home both were wearing the proper protective covering. They both had gloves and surgical masks on. And when I opened the door, I said, everyone's well here as far as we know. But of course, we know just taking those general precautions, because we don't know who could be carrying the COVID-19 virus, is just so important to know. So it's communications again, friend. It's being sure you're talking to your vendors, knowing what their precautions are, and you're talking to your tenants when you're setting up those repairs that are there. You can take advantage as well, Tyler, of some of the virtual tools that are there to show the repair issues. I had one of my NARPM friends here in the Georgia and in the Atlanta area tell me that they actually used Zoom, similar to what we're using, just to show the vendor what the problem really was. It was something having to do with like a motor in one of the air conditioners, and the technician knew exactly what he needed to do, and therefore spent less time at the home because of bit. So creative times call for creative measures, but it's very important to be sure we're not shirking any of our responsibilities on that duty to repair and are talking to our tenants about that as well.
Well, that's wonderful, and that all is very sound. I think sound advice that NARPM members and property managers in general need to follow. If you just had to bottom line it into a couple or three bullet points, how would you do that?
Well, number one is talk, right? You've got to talk to your owners, talk to your tenants, talk to your vendors, but talk. It's so important to not rely always on our email. I think we're a society that sometimes forgets about just picking up the phone and calling. You've got to be talking to the people on the other end, actually over the phone if you can, but really trying to understand the specific situations. Number two, after talk, would be document. Whatever you're agreeing to in terms of forbearance or rent abatement or partial pay, whatever it is, just be sure documenting it. Tyler gave good advice about if you're going to make something that's potentially getting a little uncomfortable for you from you're giving legal advice or you're prohibited by your state from drafting it, get some advice, but talk, document, and then finally just continue to be compliant. Remember that if your house is backed by a federally funded mortgage, you can't be charging late fees, you can't be evicting. Know your laws, stay up on it. And so talk, document, and be compliant will be our 3 takeaways.
Wonderful. Well, as always, Monica, we appreciate your taking the time to speak with us. And if you have questions, 2 ways to get those questions to us. You can send them to me, legislativeinfo@narpm.org, or you can send it to Monica, propertymanagement@gilroyfirm.com.
That's right. Thanks, Tyler. That's right. And we're always here. We're all in this together. So whatever we can do.
Wonderful. Thank you. Have a nice day, everyone. We'll see you on the next one.
Bye, everyone.